Good morning, grinders. Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka Blender HD. If you want to follow me on Twitter, and it's Friday, July 22nd. We're back. The All-Star break's done, right? We didn't have baseball for a bunch. We had a little baseball yesterday, but I didn't even bother playing. But we're back. And we got another UFC card coming up tomorrow. You know what we do on Fridays? It's Fighting Fridays. We're fighting with each other. Maybe we're fighting with each other in the chat. I see you guys in there. Or Wataz. Wataz, if you didn't already know, is the new Suki Singh, right? You're here early, 10:45 a.m. What are you doing here this early? Okay, fine. Good morning. Brian C's here, Matt Mears, Doug Montgomery, Joe Adamo, who I think Joe won some GPP, some mini max or something. He showed me. I think he showed me a screenshot of what earlier this week or something. He wanted me to. I didn't have a show on Monday the whole week. He wanted me to have a shout out that he won something. Okay, I think it was him. Maybe I don't know. Grant Brown's here. Daniel Hutchings, Nerdy Tenor. Heyo. Eagles 1985. Right. We have the mixed reaction. He loves the DFS MMA strategy show, but Doug Montgomery doesn't want me to do MMA. Love the math analytical tutorial always. You can always go back to the previous episodes. You want to watch those again? Watch it again, right? Okay, see Joe Adamo, right? Single and oh yeah, I was third in that single. It was something. He wanted to shout out for some reason. So there you go. There's your shout out. Okay, so if you want the baseball stuff, that's later today. So tune into Grinders Live, 5 p.m. Eastern. There's a 13-game slate tonight. A lot of good pitching, right? Because pretty much the rotations are starting over because they had 5 days rest. So tune in then. Then you get Crunch Time with FanDuel, presented by FanDuel. You get the weather report. I don't know if there's much bad weather today. You get all the baseball stuff later today, but we're going to be going over the UFC London card. Yeah, they're in London, so it's a noon Eastern start tomorrow. They're fitting in 14 fights. I love the bigger slates. 14 fights right up my alley. I like 14, 15 fight cards. Love it. Much easier to get unique. You don't have to. Well, I mean, you still have to worry about dupes. I mean, it's still MMA. There's only so many fighters you could choose, but it's less nerve wracking. Once you get to 11, 12 fights, 10 fights, then you start like, okay, I just want to make sure I'm playing lineups that aren't duped 20 times. There's a lot more combinations available to us. So if you have any questions about the MMA DFS strategy in general, anything you want to talk about, just type it in the YouTube chat. Give me those thumbs ups. You know, I love the thumbs in the morning. It's a new day. It's a new week. I know it's the end of the week, whatever, but give me those thumbs ups. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. So let's give a shout out to Eli. Eli's back producing. He's back, and then he's going to be gone again. So he's getting used to StreamYard. So I don't know. He could probably throw up my screen, right? I can't do it myself. Oh, there we go. Okay, now we're good. Get my spreadsheet up with some of the facts and the figures and everything. And you know what we like to do on Fridays? Fridays are not the show is not about choosing who's going to win the fights, right? We're not talking about the outcomes of the fights. You could get a combo premium package for RotoGrinders, be a subscriber, right? Even if you just want to pay for MMA, I suggest the whole shebang. You get all the sports. And we recorded a Ground and Pound podcast last night, 2 hours and 10 minutes long. We break down every single fight. Me, H3 Buddha, Mike Brown, Liam picks fights, and go through, we're basically looking in that podcast. We talk primarily around what are the paths of these fighters scoring 100 points, right? That's kind of what we focus on in DFS in comparison to their ownership. We talk a little bit about construction, a little bit about basic large field GPP strategy, but Liam primarily breaks down the fights because he knows MMA. He's forgotten more about MMA than I know about MMA. Breaks down how he sees the fights playing out, right? Different paths of the fight playing out, and then how does that relate to DFS scoring? So certain fighters are certain fights are more conducive to 100-plus point scores. Because we're playing large field GPPs. It's a 14-fight card. We have a ton of, these inside the distance lines. We got, plus 100, plus 105, plus 120, minus 115, minus 120, plus 190, plus 165, plus 125, plus 150, plus 110, plus 185. It's most likely that there's going to be 8, 9 finishes on this card, and typically finishes lead to higher scoring. So you're gonna need a lot of points tomorrow. Okay, so you're playing someone that's gonna sneak through with the decision win, 29-28 split or something like that. Probably not going to be optimal. Probably maybe you get a winning 85 points. Ain't going to make the optimal lineup most likely. So that's what the podcast is always about. And then we got Daniel Hutchins in chat. 291,713 possible DK MMA lineups. Yeah, which is a lot more. The more fights you add, it gets exponentially larger. So like once you get down to 11, like that number, gets cut in like by 10, something like that. But the card tomorrow is not like the card last week. When we talked about the card last week's card was 12 fights, and the biggest favorite on the slate was like minus 280, right? With about a 3-1 favorite, which is a decent favorite in MMA, but not like ridiculous. On this card, we have like you're getting into the mid 8s, and you're still at 2-1 favorites, right? So we got minus 485. I didn't update this for this morning, but these are last night's updated sharp lines. I typically use an offshore book for these lines. So minus 485, minus 550, minus 420, minus 410, minus 365, minus 280, minus 255, minus 250, minus 210. We got more than half the favorites are at least 2-1, if not 3, 4, or 5-1 favorites, and all big inside the distance lines. So like last week's slate with a lot more closer fights, leaving money on the table, playing a lot of underdogs. We saw last week, I think 6 underdogs won. And the optimal lineup would have had 3 underdogs in it. And no one even had that lineup. Like the optimal lineup like left 3,000 on the table. This is the complete opposite type of slate. That we don't have many underdogs that have great shots at winning. And also, even if you do pick underdogs, you want shots at 100 plus points. This could be the slate we're getting an underdog at 80 or 90 if all the other favorites win and a lot of them smash, maybe fine. But we're still trying to target on a large slate with a lot of fights favored to end inside the distance at like 100 plus points. And the ownership wise on the dogs are kind of spread out outside of Curtis Blades, outside of the main event underdog. And then on the favorite side, we see a decent amount of condensed ownership on kind of this high 8, low 9 range. Only because with the dogs not being all that appealing this slate, people are going to sacrifice like paying up for 9,300, 9,400, 9,500 because really the metrics, as far as the betting lines are concerned, for the guys that are about 300, 400, 500 cheaper are about the same, right? So we have like Jai Herbert and Patty Pimblett who have 55, 53% inside the distance chances, and they're only 9,000 and 8,900, right? So they're going to be fairly popular. Jonathan Pierce, plus 165 inside the distance. And also, he tends to win by a lot of takedowns, okay? Do I think that's going to happen on this specific fight? Well, you have to tune in to the Ground and Pound podcast. We talk about that. But I think a lot of ownership is going to be condensed around them and as well as the main event. And the main event is an $8,300, $7,900 fight. So it's going to be very, very popular because you're probably going to have to play someone in this range in almost every lineup, right? Unless you're building barbell lineups, you're paying way up and way down, you're probably hitting this range. And in a 5-round fight with the inside the distance lines of plus 110 and plus 235, and especially with Blades, if he wins, it's most likely with a lot of takedowns and top control and ground and pound. Like his ceiling is very high, and Aspinall, he'll probably win if he does first 2 rounds with a knockout. So the likelihood of them putting up, 90, 100 points is fairly high. The winner of this match, and at that price point, that's probably they don't have to be a top 6 scorer on the slate. Like Makayev, Wood, Mason Jones up here at the top. They need to be a top 6 scorer, right? But Aspinall or Blades don't need to because, like, even let's say the top 4 scorers on the slate are all in the 9,000s. You can't fit them all in your lineup, right? So let's say just for argument's sake, Makayev has 130, Wood has 120, Mason Jones has 110, Daikese has 110, right? Something like that. Like, well, you can't fit all four of them in. If those are the four top scorers on the slate, like, you're going to need probably maybe three of them. Or maybe even two, because if you get, like, if Hermanson scores a bunch, if Blade scores a bunch, if Craig gets a first-round sub, like, you may be able to get 105 points at a cheaper price point and then fit everyone in your lineup. So understand that even for lineup construction. So really, the appeal of the main event to me is the price point. But in comparison to the ownership, there's a lot of people on this slate that could outscore the main event winner. Okay? I'm more scared of Blades than I am Aspinall, by the way. Okay, because Blades in a decision win in 5 rounds could score 150 points, right? Because he could have 2 takedowns per round, ground control, in like a 50-45 or a 49-46 type of decision. Like, Blades could score 140 points. Aspinall, not so much. He's, I think, more reliant on the early knockout. And even with an early knockout, even in like a second round knockout, like 90, 95 points, maybe he doesn't make the optimal lineup. Okay? So when we're focusing around combinations, remember, I said people are more likely to be playing these high 8K type fighters and less likely to play the bigger underdogs on the slate. So that the contrarian construction for tomorrow are barbell lineups. Okay? So let's see the difference here. I'll build. Here's most likely style of lineups. Right? You'll get like Herbert, Pimblett, Pierce. Let's see. And maybe Aspinall. Then we get 75, 50. And then you have to take a shot at like Amirkhani. Even if you don't play Aspinall, let's say you play Blades, Amirkhani, 8,000, Hermanson. Like something like this. Like, I'm assuming a lineup like these combinations, like I'm going to just basically group out. Right, we got 36%, 39% owned, 32% owned, 39% owned, 16 and 19. Right, because there's no underdog that's going to be like ridiculous. Maybe the underdogs that other than obviously the main event. Well, Hermanson's going to get ownership, but he's barely an underdog. He's an $8,000 fighter. But at the lower level, I think Craig and Amirkhani are going to be the most used underdogs on the slate. Maybe some Leonardo as well. Right? People aren't going to want to go down pretty much past 7,500. Once you get down there, you're in shaky waters. But the likelihood of one of these guys, I mean, in between Silva, Levitt, Nelson, Hadzovic, Klein, Goldie, Rosa, Johnson, can one of them win? Right? Can one win and put up 90, 100 points? Quite possibly. Like Silva, first round sub. Levitt has a grappling upside against Pimblett. Nelson won, not early knockout. Hadzovic early knockout, Klein early knockout, Goldie. I don't know about that. Rosa, who that sub at some that maybe finally gets a sub from the bottom, and most likely is not. Charles Johnson, who knows? But I mean, people aren't going to want to play this, and then the ownership shows. But it's spread out. It's not like it's not like some of these guys are 5% owned. It's like it's all around like the high single digit, low double digit types of fighters. Okay, so there's not going to be one that's like, well, I'm going to play this guy because he's the lowest out of the bunch. I think once you get down to playing one of these fighters, 7,400 or below, it's not going to matter what their ownership is if you're playing one in their lineup. So this type of lineup. So if we're going to go through, let's go through with our combination calculator, a little trusty tool, right? I didn't update it for it's probably a similar field size for the throwdown, right? It's not a $25 entry fee, but whatever, 32,000 or so. Okay, so if we put in these ownership numbers, we could try to calculate just using product ownership, which is multiplying all the ownership numbers together and then multiplying it by the field size to get a sense, a general blunt average of how many times this lineup is likely to be duplicated. So if we go here and we see 36, 39, 32. So let's put that in. 36, 39, 32. And the last ones are 39, 16, 19. 39, 16, 19. Okay, 17 times on average or something like that, right? 0.05% product ownership. So at this number, I don't really want to play this combination. The problem is that fighter 5 and fighter 6, like these 4 people together, like are going to produce a number about that big anyway. So even if we leave a little money on the table, so let's say we take out Amirkhani, the 16% owned guy, and even just put in Hadzovic, the 8% owned guy, right? So if we go back to here, we put in 8%, we get it down to 8. Remember, we have a 14 fight card. Like, we don't have to be satisfied with just like an under 10. I'm really looking for, heavily looking for under 5s and uniques, okay? Especially when they're going to, more of them are going to be available. So kind of, giving in and going, maybe I have some lineups that are 7, 8, 9 time, like something like that. I think you could do better. So I think grouping out these fighters, right? Basically, grouping out any fighter that is no more than 4 as of right now. Let's take a look at this. So if we take away Hadzovic and Hermanson, right, and we get just Herbert, Pimblett, Pierce, and Blades, okay, and we can put Aspinall in there if we want instead of Blades. Like, how many combinations of the other 2 fighters are left? Okay, so we're going to do that. Let's see. You could run lineup HQ until it breaks to find out how many combinations there are. 60. Okay, that's when it stops. Obviously, if it's over 300, it'll just stop at 300. So if we take out these 2 and put in 60 combinations, the average dupes of these 4 combined together is 9 on average. Now, will there be some that are under 5? Yes. Obviously, if you leave, the more money you leave on the table. You play the 2 biggest underdogs here, right? You play, you put this together and you play like Charles Johnson and Charles Rose on the bottom, and you leave 2,000 on the table. This lineup most likely is even unique. So the 4 together, on average, duped around 9 times or so. So there's still uniques available there. But maybe you don't want to play 4 guys that are 30% plus together. Maybe you don't want to play 2, right? But let's just start at 4. So let's go to these player groups and start adding this. So we have Herbert, Pimblett, Aspinall, main event, Blades. Who else is over 30? Probably Pierce. Let's take a look at what I got in here. Okay, Herbert, Pimblett, Pierce. Krylov may get there. So maybe we throw Krylov in. Craig could come close, but I don't think he makes 30%. I don't even think Muhammad Makayev makes 30%. At 9,500, people may. It really hampers your lineup when you start putting in $9,500 fighter in your lineup. So let's add Krylov also, which is a lot of the fighters, if we see here, in that mid-range. Herbert, 9,000, Pimblett, 8,900, Pierce, 8,700, Krylov, 8,600. I think a lot of lineups will have at least one of these fighters in the lineup. That's the easiest way to build a lineup that has a ceiling and then not have to play anyone that's 7,400 and below. But what I'm telling you is that the least used construction is going to be the barbell ones. Like, imagine playing Makayev at 9,500, Mason Jones at 92, and Jacasey at 91. Average remaining player salary is 7,400. You're going to have to play some of these dogs. So let's say to get leverage, you play Levitt and Nelson together, right? Against Pimblett and Herbert, who are going to be 35+% owned, right? You're able to do that. And you have 7,700. You can even play Paul Craig in this lineup, who's going to be decently owned as an underdog. Like, these are going to be the less used types of lineups. Of course, and you see here, the lineup doesn't even have a main event fighter in it. And the main event is going to garner like 80+% ownership between both fighters. So now let's put these numbers in just to show you the difference. So you got 28, 28, 24 in the first 3 fighters. 28, 28, 24 is a combination of 1. The other are 10, 12, and 18. 10, 12, 18. Average dupes, 1. You're good. Most likely going to be unique. Well, probably duped once or twice, right? Because it's a 50K lineup. So it's more likely to be duped. If we took out Craig at 18% and put in like Claudio Silva instead at 74, leaving 300 on the table, right? We get a little bit less ownership, 11%, and we don't spend the entire salary. So like this is a 49-7 lineup that could easily be unique. So you'll be able to find lineups that are above 49.5 that are going to be at least under 5 dupes, if not unique. So these are the types of lineups that I'm going to be focused on more. Lineups that may not even contain the main event, right? Let's say we keep these 3 fighters, and then we do play Curtis Blades in the lineup, a main event fighter. 71.50. Now we really have to start playing the Roses, the Goldies, or whatever. So, like, once we start getting away from this build, so let's say we play Makayev and Jones, we take out Jacasey, and we play, like, Ozdemir has leverage against, like, 20-something% Craig ownership. We're playing a mid-range fighter that's not Herbert, Pimblett, Pierce, Krylov. Now we have a little bit more wiggle room, 74.50 for the last 2 fighters. So we still have to play like someone like Jordan Levitt or Kyle Nelson. 7,600, we put Gustafsson in here. Like, this could be good. Even though you're playing a 39% owned fighter, this could be fine. Let's put in the combo calculator and see. 28, 28, 25, 39. 25, 39. And the last 2 fighters are 10 and 16. 10 and 16. Average dupes 3. Okay, so this isn't that bad. This is a 50K lineup. So this may end up being duped maybe 4 or 5 times. So if we leave a little money off the table, instead of playing Gustafsson here, we play, I don't know, Hannah Goldie, or even if we play Nelson in this lineup and do that together, leave 400 on the table. So replacing the 12% on 16 with 12, average dupes 2, it leaves a couple of hundred on the table. This is going to be an under 5 lineup. That still leaves only 400 on the table. So I'm going to try to build these types of lineups, because these fighters in these 9K ranges, they have upside for 120 points. Now, what I think, if you listen to the fight breakdowns that we did on the MMA Ground and Pound, while Paddy Pimblett and Jai Herbert have the best inside the distance odds, they don't necessarily have the highest ceiling from a peripheral scoring standpoint. Like, the path to like, Herbert's not going to wrestle. So, like, Herbert's win condition for 100-plus points is essentially a first-round knockout. Okay? Pimblett's win condition, most probably, is going to be probably a first-round knockout. I'd rather, at lower ownership, deal with guys like Jacasey, Jones, and Makayev, or Wood, like, that in a 3-round decision could outscore them. Because these are all going to be wrestling-based fighters. Now, Pimblett does have somewhat of a ground game. But in a fight against Jordan Levitt, like, if this fight ends up on his feet, I don't see how Jordan Levitt wins. Like, Levitt is essentially a one-dimensional grappler. So Levitt's going to want it on the ground. Pimblett could win on the feet more, even though he does have a ground game. He's more likely to knock him out than submit him or anything like that. So I think the inside the distance odds, and also being that they're cheaper than some of these higher 9K fighters, I think their ownership is going a little bit inflated. And it's primarily due to their price point, that you don't have to worry about having to play a Damir Hadzovic or a Hannah Goldie in a lineup that has these fighters. And in the main event, this could be such a high-scoring slate that the main event doesn't even make the optimal lineup. Aspinall gets a second-round KO, ends up with 93 points, and misses, because there's 8 fighters on the slate that have 100-plus. And you don't need it. You don't need it. Blades, right, gets a 3rd round, right? Aspinall gasses a bit, gets a 3rd or 4th round stoppage, right? After losing a round or 2, right? Blades is down 2 rounds to 1 in the fourth round, gets a ground and pound finish in the 4th round. Maybe he scores 83 points. Aspinall scores 40. And the main event fails to be in the optimal. Now, at this price point, it's much harder, because most people are going to be playing a lineup. You don't need 130 points from an $8,300 or a $7,900 fighter. And you're not going to be able to fit in. Even if 4 of these 9K guys put up a lot of points, you can't fit all of them in your lineup. So that's my only concern about the main event. But the expert survey will come out today, I believe later today. The Ground and Pound podcast should come out. My hot take of the week is that the main event winner is not in the optimal lineup. That's less probable, yes, but that's why it's a hot take. So I'm going to be building a bunch of lineups. Like I'm playing 150 lineups tomorrow. And I could see half my lineups not having a main event fighter in it. Doesn't mean I'll have none? No, of course not. But at this ownership, 30, 35, 40% ownership, I'd love to compete against the 20% of lineups that just doesn't have the main event. You may not even need the optimal at that point, right? We saw last week that the optimal wasn't even the winning big, large field GPP lineup. The top like 6 or 7 optimals weren't, right? We had so many underdogs winning and leaving money on the table that the next best lineup leaves 2,800 on the table. The next best lineup leaves 1,900 on the table, and just people didn't have these lineups. So I think like the 8th best optimal possible lineup won the large field GPP yesterday. I think it won it solo, or at least like maybe tied 2 or 3 ways. This is more of the slate where you're going to spend most of your salary. I don't see this as being a slate where the optimal lineup leaves 2,000 on the table. Can it happen? Sure, I guess, but it's a much lower probability. Look at these win odds for so many of these fighters. We don't have 12 close fights, kind of like what we did last week. Let's see. Dana Hudgens says last 11 fight card, they played 61,578 combos. Yeah, which is much lower than 291,713. But this is what we talk about on Fridays, right? We even have we get the little comments that are even on the screen. Okay, Eli's taking care of it. But I think in this 9K range, the ownership is going to be fairly spread out. I think Mason Jones, out of all these options, has the highest ceiling on the slate out of the bunch, only because I think he could win with 8 takedowns and in a 3-round decision, he could still score 130 points. Makayev, Wood, Jacasey, all of that type of upside also. But the ownership, like we have Makayev at 28, Wood at 21, Jones at 28, Jacasey at 24. Like I think this is about what they're going to be. I think that all 4 of those guys will be somewhere in the 20 to 28 range. I don't think any of them hit 30. Jones would be the closest to 30. So like maybe Jones is somewhere between 26 and 30. Makayev is somewhere between 26 and 30. Wood is more like 20 to 24. Jacasey's somewhere in the middle, like 22 to 26. But I think if Herbert and Pimblett do not get first-round knockouts, I mean, look how many guys they have to. I just think for the extra 100 to 200, even if you have to take a shot on an underdog that you don't necessarily like, I think there are less lineups that you're competing against when that happens. And the extra added value to doing that is that if you're going to choose to play, let's say you chose to play Jones and Jacasey instead of Herbert and Pimblett, and you have to play a fighter underneath 7,400. Well, those fighters are the fighters that are facing Herbert and Pimblett. So not only are you forced into a range that those other lineups will not have, you're playing a fighter that is direct leverage over a fighter that they have, right? So you get it's like double leverage, double the amount of relative value, extra. Because it's much different. Like if you're going to play 2 9K guys up here, 3 9K guys up here, and then play Hannah Goldie against Molly McCann and leave money on the table, like why wouldn't you just play Levitt or Nelson? Because like your win condition with your lineup is that your 9K fighter scores higher than the Herbert and Pimblett and Pierce and Krylov and those guys. So if that's the case, what's an outcome where they do score higher? Well, it's because the other guys lost. So if the other guys lose, that means these underdogs win. So even if like Nelson gets a second round KO and 85 points, like for 7,200, like that could possibly still be optimal. But what you're doing is you're knocking out all those Herbert lineups and you're playing someone that is directly negatively correlative to those Jai Herbert lineups. Because for Jai Herbert to score poorly, it's most likely because he lost. I mean, it could just be a 3rd round KO or a 3-round decision. and they both don't get there, that's true also. But what is one of the outcomes where Herbert fails? It's because he lost. Or Pimblett fails, it's because he lost. Pierce against Amirkhani. Krylov, Gustafsson against Krylov. Like, so if you're going to play less of these guys, it makes sense to play more of their opponents. Especially in lineups where you're forced to play someone in that range and you're not playing one of the higher owned fighters in the top range. They're just kind of piecing things together. You know, this is construction strategy. So just to go over that again, okay? Because what people will do, they'll do this all the time. They'll go, okay, I'm going to get different by not playing Herbert. I'm going to get different by playing Jacasey and Jones instead of Pimblett and Herbert. They'll still play a main event fighter. They'll still play Aspinall or something in their lineup, right? They'll play Ozdemir or something, Chris Curtis or something like that. Chris Curtis. Then they'll see like, oh, average remaining player salary is $7,600, and they'll go, well, I'm going to play Amirkhani and Craig. We're both going to be owned together, especially. And they go something like this, right? They build a lineup like this at $50K. They go, well, look, I'm getting different by playing Jacasey and Jones over Herbert and Pimblett. It's like, well, if you're going to do that, why are you playing Amirkhani? Why are you going to play more of a more owned underdog? Not a high owned underdog, but a more owned underdog. Why don't you just go down and play Levitt instead? Leave 200 on the table and play Levitt. You go, well, Amirkhani I like better than Levitt. Well, I know, I'm with you there. I prefer Amirkhani over Levitt myself. But if you're playing a lineup that is specifically leveraged against Pimblett Herbert lineups, why don't you take the extra leverage by playing their opponents? Because if Pimblett puts up 120 points and Levitt scores 10, this lineup is dead no matter what because you don't have Pimblett in it, right? So if Pimblett outscores Jacasey and Jones, you're dead to win anyway. So you don't have to worry about, well, what happens if Amirkhani does well and Levitt doesn't? Well, you're dead anyway because you don't have Pimblett. Right? If you could say the same thing for Herbert. So play Nelson here. If the reasoning behind playing these other guys is because you don't want to play Herbert or you don't want to play Pimblett, and you're going to still have to play someone in the low range at somewhere, play their opponents. Because if they score well, your lineup's dead to win anyway. So many people don't do that. So many people are like, yeah, well, I'm glad I faded Pimblett, right? Right. Pimblett lost in the first round, but I barely had any Jordan Levitt. Like, how do you do that? How do you fade have very little of a 38% owned guy, but barely have any of his opponent? That doesn't make any sense. Right? If you're gonna play, you're gonna be like, oh, Herbert's first round knockout dependent. So he may bust. It's like, well, another way that he busts is that he gets clocked. And Nelson has a first-round knockout. So if you're purposely saying, well, I'll play Pimblett, but not Herbert. Well, in Pimblett lineups, why don't you play Nelson? In Herbert lineups, why don't you play Levitt? In Pierce, in lineups that don't have Pierce, you play Amirkhani. In lineups that don't have Krylov, you play Gustafsson. Right? So let's say you do play a Herbert lineup without Herbert. Let's say you're playing a Herbert Pimblett lineup and you don't play the main event. So that's the way that you get different. So let's say you're playing Pimblett. Let's say you're playing Herbert, Pimblett, and Jacasey or something like that. So you are playing Herbert and Pimblett together. Well, you're not playing the main event, so that's how you're getting different. But that means you're not playing like Jonathan Pierce. So why don't you play Amirkhani? If you're not playing Krylov, why don't you play Gustafsson in the lineup? You're going to have to fit these guys in, and you have $7,900 left. And you play Victoria Leonardo instead of the main event. Right? Because once you put Blades in there, then the lineup ownership gets too high. Like, think in those terms. Even if you're just hand building. What lineups go together? So, like, maybe I do play Herbert and Pimblett in some lineups, but I make a group. Right? We have this group where it's like, maybe you don't want to play any more than 3 of these players. Maybe not even 2. I'm more likely to just have 2. Right? Max 2 on these fighters. Herbert, Pimblett, Pierce, Krylov, Aspinall, and Blades. Which means I could still get Herbert and Pimblett lineups. It's just that they don't contain Pierce, Krylov, Aspinall, and Blades. Which is fine. So if I have a Herbert Pimblett lineup, it doesn't have the main event in it, right? But I don't have them together. If it's Herbert and Aspinall, well, then I don't have Pimblett, Pierce, Krylov, Blades. I have other fighters in there. So this is more likely the type of group that I'm going to be making for tomorrow's slate. Max 2. If you're playing small field stuff, maybe max 3. But I wouldn't be, playing 4 of these guys just seems like a recipe of running into dupes for no reason. I don't see a reason to do it. Unless those lineups leave like 1,500 on the table. Then they're less likely to be duped. But I don't see that being optimal on this slate. Daniel Hutchins says, so far in my 150 set, I only have 7 lineups that leave more than 1K on the table. Okay, so there is his algorithm knows. I'm assuming last week, Daniel, you had way more that left 1,000 on the table. So I had a ton. I had more than half my lineups left over 1,000 on the table. But this lineup, this slate, not going to be leaving much money on the table. I'm going to be building 300. What I'm going to be doing probably later tonight, because it's an early card tomorrow. Either I'm going to get up early, like 8 o'clock in the morning, or I'm going to do it late at night tonight, is run through and build 300 lineups and then weed them out from there. Run 300. Like, what I will do is do something like this. Let's just put this at 20, just as an example, just to show you. Obviously, I put my own numbers in, right? Because I get my rating score. I do all this stuff like that. So if I'm going to build 20 lineups, build rules, yeah, it's going to be hard to show you without the rating numbers in here to kind of automatically give me the leverage that I need. But I'll build 20 lineups. I'll obviously put, numbers in, whatever like that, and then go through and go, especially on the salary, high to low, and go, is this too high owned? Right? Not even looking at the ownership sum, but just the combination of the fighters. 39, 30, 24, 21, 19, 12. Right? So do something like this. Put that in the combo calculator. And then if that's too high, then I take note of what like that ownership sum kind of is. So like 30% owned fighters and an ownership sum of that, I kind of start removing from my lineup pool. So I look at the salary spent. Obviously, it's going to spend most of the salary because I'm using just median projections. I'm not using my rating score. So like here's a 49-7 lineup that has 30% owned fighters. This maybe I don't get rid of because once you start leaving money off the table, then it's less and less likely to be duped. So like this top lineup over here, I may just get rid of, right? I may go, okay, that's too high. This is too high. This is too high, right? But I'm starting with 300. So if I'm playing 150, I'm pretty much building 300 and getting rid of 150 lineups. So that's what I spend most of my time doing. Of course, I will set exposures. I want more with my rating score in my spreadsheet. It ends up building lineups that the more under-owned the fighter is, the more of them that I get anyway. Okay, so that naturally happens, unlike median projections where that's not going to happen. It's like based on this, I'm going to get a lot of Mandy Bohm, right? I have Mandy Bohm at 9-10% owned. Her ceiling is suspect. She's plus 380 inside the distance. It's a 14-fight card. I'm not going to have a lot of Mandy Bohm, but I'm going to have over the field. She's under-owned. Unlikely to score 100 points, but still more likely than 10%, right? Probably 14% chance or something like that. So she's going to come up a lot, right? Yet someone like Jonathan Pierce may not come up as much, right? Someone like Leonardo versus some of these other underdogs, right? I'm going to get a lot more Levin and Nelson in my lineups compared to a Leonardo or a Craig or even a Blades. Not going to get much Chris Curtis or Aspinall. Like a lot of the main event, I'm not going to get much of, right? Because the rating incorporates the ownership into this. So I'm basically building lineups that have the highest leverage rating based on my little spreadsheet here. So that solves the issue of caring about median fighter projections. So it'll automatically build. Last week, I was building lineups that had a high leverage rating that left 1,200 on the table, right? Because we had underdogs that were under-owned. And they start jamming those guys in. So here's a little refresher for tomorrow's UFC London card. 14 fights. It starts at noon Eastern. So just, it's not at 6 o'clock at night or whatever. Make sure you wake up, especially if you're on the West Coast. Don't leave your dummy lineups, Justin. Set your alarms. Set your alarms. And you could set your alarms later today. Later today for Grinders Live. 5 p.m. Eastern. They'll be going over the 13-game MLB slate tonight, followed by Crunch Time. And they'll be leading you up to lock for everything about MLB tonight. There's a FanDuel FanDuel video coming out on the channel. We got stuff on the Scores and Odds channel. If you're betting, props, anything like that, give me those thumbs on your way out the door. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. It's Fighting Friday. Hit me in the face. You can feel free to little punch me in the face on the screen, and that'll be fine. As always, theoryofdfs.com. One of the concepts that I even talked about today about like the combinations and the leverage, that type of stuff. How to think like a professional DFS player. It applies to all sports. It's not just MMA, right? So if you want to get that, pick that up. Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, theoryofdfs.com, 15-hour audio masterclass. I will teach you how to play DFS using game theory concepts, and hopefully you could turn into a profitable player. So I'll be back on Monday, right? We're back to the normal schedule, right? Baseball is back. Then we got NFL, 49 days away to the start of the regular season in NFL. But we also will have preseason content, not on this show, but we do have preseason stuff. If you're a combo premium, if you're an NFL subscriber for RotoGrinders, sign up for that. Click on the link in the description, get $10 off your first month. Tons of stuff coming up in the fall. We'll deal with the dog days of baseball for a couple of more weeks, and then it's NFL. Then it's the NBA starts coming back. The hockey even comes back, and we still got golf. We got MMA. We got League of Legends, Madden Sims. So until then, I'll see you on Monday. Answering your DFS strategy questions like I normally do on the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.